This is the May market report for Southeast Michigan, and the good news is, as you'd expect from April activity in the beginning of May, that everything is up. All the arrows point up in the air, and what's good about it is certainly it's up from March, and that's the natural flow of business. The business picks up through April and May and peaks in June. But what's nice looking at those numbers is that we're also up from last April. And as you recall, the winter, although winter wasn't perfect in terms of severity this year, it was much more difficult last year. So we had that rush of activity in April and May and June of last year. And this April was actually ahead of last April. So that tells us that there's a lot of buyer demand. I shouldn't say a lot, but a good amount of buyer demand still left in the market. And what's fueling the activity isn't as much buyer demand as squeezing of inventory. Now, inventories are up as well this April compared to last. They've been up really all year so far. So not up a lot, but in 8 to 10%. And in Washington County, for example, actually they were down a little bit. But in general, there are more homes to look at. And I think that's brought some additional buyers out of the woodwork, those that sort of gave up looking for houses last year because it just couldn't find anything, and they're coming out sort of in a spring rush. So we think that provides for an active spring. We had figured that this spring may not be as active as last spring, and that's probably true. It won't be quite as wild, but you can still expect the same general feel for the market. The inventories under 250,000 will be smaller and continue to shrink a little bit. Those over 250,000, over 500,000, continue to grow, so there's more choice in those markets. But across the board, we're still seeing very strong buyer activity, and in general, it's sort of what we expected, a good, solid spring market. Values are up. Price per square foot, which is the best surrogate we use sort of for appreciation, was up 6% in April and up 11%. This is for Southeast Michigan in March. So we're seeing some good numbers there. And in fact, we probably should revise a little bit our expectations of home value appreciation this year. If the activity continues even through summer into the fall, that we think appreciation rates will actually rise faster than we thought. We thought they'd be in the 4 to 6% range, and they might be 6 to 7% this year. So the market is very strong. I want to touch on 2 points actually that are not specifically market related, but are related to the consumer and to how transactions come together in the ensuing months. One is sort of a fraud alert, actually, and although it's something that will happen rarely, when it does happen, when it has happened across the country, it's been pretty catastrophic, particularly for buyers. And what it is it's a scam that you see often in the marketplace in other areas, and it's where these criminals get a hold of or follow the emails of anyone in a transaction, where it's the buyer, the seller, the realtor, the title company, and they infiltrate that through cookies and other ways, and they monitor the real estate transaction, and they look for look for keywords like wiring funds as close to a closing. And with that, they will impersonate either the title person or the realtor that you trust in the transaction, impersonate them online, and occasionally even with a phone call, representing the title company and sending false wire instructions to the buyer. If the buyer uses those wire instructions, they will of course be sending their money to the criminal directly as opposed to the seller. The easiest way around that, very simple fix, certainly update your virus software and all those things, but the simple fix is when you and if you receive wire instructions, either on the phone from someone you have not met before, or certainly email, even from someone that you do know, always confirm those wires instructions voice to voice with someone that you know. Typically, it will always, in most cases, it will always be a realtor. Occasionally, if you know the person at the title company you're dealing with, talk to them as well. But always confirm any wire instructions with someone you actually know voice to voice. So that's the first. The second is something that we'll just touch on just for a minute, and we'll touch on in more detail probably in June. In July, but this is a change for, I won't get into the details, there's lots of acronyms, but it's basically the finishing of the implementation of the Dodd Frank Law, which came out of the financial crisis, and it basically is regulating how mortgage companies provide disclosures, information to borrowers, and the regulation, the rules in which they have to work with borrowers. And it provides a different closing statement for buyers and sellers that's, quite frankly, easier to understand and follow. So there's a lot of good in the law. But one of the difficult things is the last piece is being officially implemented August 1st. For those of you that are buying and selling a home, anticipate doing that in the last half of the year. You can anticipate that mortgages will take longer, up to 10 to 15 days longer for approval, and that the closing period will be a little looser than it normally would be because of the way that information needs to be disclosed to buyers. It'll be a little looser. So challenges for buyers and sellers will be things like back-to-back transactions where you're closing on your home in the morning and using those proceeds to buy a home in the afternoon. Those will be challenges. Also, if you're planning on moving into your home that day of the closing, those could be challenges as well. So your realtors will work very hard to organize and manage the process of when the closing date is and when the buyers and sellers need to have the closing date, and working backwards with the mortgage company. But the reality is it's going to take longer. And we'll get into more detail, probably more detail than you'd like to know. But it's important for consumers to understand the process, and that at least for this year, while everyone gets used to new regulations, it'll probably take a little longer to do transactions. But outside of those, I hate to end on a negative note for both of those instances, but those are two things coming our way. The positive note as I began the conversation was that the market is strong and doing well. On a positive bragging note for the company, we did over $500 million in sales in the month of April. No real estate company in Michigan has ever come close to that, so it obviously was a record month for us. And congratulations to all of our salespeople. And it was a lot of hard work, but and there'll be some great months coming as well, we anticipate. So thank you.